Well, for more on these latest developments in China-U.S. economic relations, I'm joined by Haiyan Wang, Managing Partner of the China-India Institute. Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
So let's start with an overview. What's your take on China's foreign trade performance for 2017?
I thought the 2017 performance is actually very healthy, and with the export growing close to 11% and import growing close to 19%, I think that this is a reflection of an overall global economic growth. If you look at the global economic growth, over half of the economies has been having an upturn and growing at 3% global economic growth versus the 2.4% in 2016. Naturally, that growth creates an export market. But China's economy has also grown better than expected. According to Premier Li Keqiang, that China's 2017 GDP likely has grown 6.9%, better than they expected, 6.5%. I think that the 2017 number, of course, is also because 2016 number was pretty low. And now that is reflected in a better 2017 numbers. Right. If you look at long-term wise, if you say take the net export as percentage of GDP, we see China's next export as percentage of GDP has been going down from the peak of nearly 9% prior to financial crisis in 2008 down to last year's about 2.7%.
So something of a rebalancing.
Yeah, rebalancing. And also it means that China is much less export dependent today than 10 years ago.
Now let's look at something that's been in the news a lot. A lot of these Chinese deals that have been basically set aside now. The U.S. doesn't want to pursue. We have Huawei and AT&T with the Ant Financial MoneyGram deal. How surprised are you that this is happening? And what do you think this means then in terms of the confidence that U.S. companies can have in getting these deals done with Chinese companies?
Well, overall, I have sensed that the outbound investment environment for Chinese enterprises, in particular, in acquiring foreign technology companies will become tougher. That, everybody has been keeping a close eye on because we know that Made in China 2025 aims to make China stronger in technology, climbing up the value chain, poses direct competitive threats to some of the existing incumbents. So you could expect that pressure of trying to protect the domestic companies' competitive edge. That said, I'm still sometimes surprised by the increasing scrutiny and the mistrust based on national security concerns, even in cases where maybe national security is not a concern. For example, on the financial by the acquisition with the employees, U.S. employees based in Dallas, with the servers for the data based in Dallas. So there are ways to protect all of these financial data that is not going to have a breach to privacy issues, but still it's raised to the level of national security. That is somewhat surprising to me.
And I do want to get to the issue of the U.S. reportedly perhaps considering more executive orders and punitive tariffs against China. How realistic are these concerns, and what should Chinese companies then be doing to protect themselves?
Well, I think that President Trump made a promise that he's going to act really tough on China. After coming into the power to the office last year, the administration I think held back because of the more urgent agenda of seeking China's cooperation on putting pressure on North Korea, and perhaps the trade agenda would be back to a top priority. I would not be surprised that we'll see more cases of anti-dumping duties against Chinese products, being it steel or aluminum or solar panels. And then at some point that he would want to look as being tough on China, and considering also that President Trump's domestic approval rating has kept on sliding down, and I guess acting tough on China would divert some of that attention. I think that for Chinese companies, there are third country routes that using third countries as the base for exporting to the major markets, being in the U.S. or Europe, is certainly one option. And I think for the Chinese government, there are possible also tit-for-tat measures acting against certain major export products from the U.S. to China.
So then, given what we've seen, something of a roller coaster in President Trump's attitude towards trade with China, what are your expectations then for the coming year?
Coming year 2008, I think that the trade tension could go up higher than last year. Because of this rising trade surplus, and I certainly think that would be raised up as a red signal again, saying that we must stop increasing our trade surplus or trade deficit with China. And I also think that this year, maybe with the North Korea and South Korea getting into talks again, perhaps the urgency of soliciting China's support maybe put a little bit less of an urgent agenda, and then that would give the Trump administration some very, very hawkish representatives, some voice to take on some anti-dumping duty issues.
And just quickly then, because some people are saying, could this then be the start of a potential trade war? Yes or no? Do you think it's too soon?
No, not going to be a full-fledged war. And I think that it will be suicidal to both economies. And I also think that the U.S.'s businesses are too conflicted on that front. Some businesses benefit from a good relationship with China. Wall Street does not want to see tension. As long as there is a tension, you see the stock prices going down, and so many Americans' retirement fund is tied to the stock market. Global supply chains are far more complex than what we see. And maybe U.S. allies like Korea, South Korea, and Japan may not want to see the flaring up of a trade war, because part of China's export to the U.S. actually, depend on, importing stuff from U.S. allies.
So certainly worth taking a holistic view. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. Always good to have you. Haiyan Wang there for us, Managing Partner at the China-India Institute.